Hi everyone, and welcome. Hope you're enjoying Wireframe, and thanks to everyone who helped to organize. It's wonderful to see everyone here. My name is Tom. I am a composer. I started off just writing music on my computer, doing crazy electronic stuff, and recording like drills and turning them into solos. And recording strange sounds, and eventually started playing guitar and playing in rock bands, and getting into heavy metal, getting into death metal. And after about 10 years later, I was like, I should probably go study music properly and go do a degree. And so I went to study music at Tiger University. Ended up doing lots of film scores and for local projects and having my music recorded by New Zealand Symphony Orchestra and doing fun stuff like that. And briefly did some lecturing in video game music at Otago University. That's kind of the cool stuff I've done. I did my dissertation in the music of the Metroid series, so looking at how like early NES music evolved and kind of themes they came up with and how that evolved through Super Metroid and then to Metroid Prime. So yeah, that was fun. And I love fugues. You can look that up if you're not sure what that is. Who am I also? I'm also a game designer. I design tabletop war games. I love history. I'll read like books about some tank commander in World War II and take notes and be like, oh, this is awesome, I should make a game about this. That's one of the most popular games there. Missile Threat, played all over the world. People seem to like my games and buy them and then get print on demand and buy their own miniatures and print them. Hang them up. That's me there with my brother. We're playing some like double siege game that I've created, like medieval kind of game based on Age of Empires, because our parents were letting us use the computer for about half an hour at a time. We were like, oh, we need more games, man. Okay, we'll have to create something. So we'd create these like, war games, basic war games. I've got my chariots, I've got my horses running around, got some dice. So yeah, that's me at age 12 and my brother. Probably the biggest success is one of my games was introduced into the entire country in Ukraine in their high schools. They use that as part of the Defense of Ukraine program. That was pretty crazy when that happened. I love, being on my laptop in bed at 3 a.m. and doing data entry and putting in like, this ship has 10 guns, that ship has 30 guns, this ship has 300 meters. I just and go through all this data and give my players like, 1,200 different ships to choose from, for example. So yeah, I'm weird like that, man. Okay, music for games. There's so many different types of people and the way they communicate is almost infinite. So I can't tell you how to solve any of those problems. It's all down to feeling out those relationships. I always think that communicating calmly and positively is a really good way to do it. When you're dealing with artists or musicians, the artists, you really need to know that you're in service of a product, you're in service of a game designer or director, and any alterations or edits are not like an attack on you personally. It's just they want the game to align with their what they had in their head, their original ideas. And so I think that's really important as an artist, from the artist side, to really understand that and not be like, okay, they need me to change something. Well, that's not because I'm bad. It's because I still need to do some edits. We need to try something else. So you will have to do rewrites. You will have to try new things. It can be frustrating, but trying to, even if you're pissed off, just to be like, okay, that's great, smiley face. Don't always reflect exactly what your emotion is at that time, and that can help the relationships be a lot more smoother. Usually I like to do like game developer leading the terminology. So there's lots of different types of game developers, and some will know about music, some won't. And so I'll let them lead on what kind of terminology they're using. If they start talking to me about like keys and chords, I'll be like, okay, they know about that, I can use those terms. Otherwise, I'll talk more in emotions and like, what do you want to feel in this setting, in this specific track. And the wise warrior avoids the battle, Sun Tzu, or Sun Tzu, as you're supposed to pronounce it. We both need to scout the way as to how these relationships are going to work, both developers and artists. So developers have a wide range of music know-how. Some of them play guitar, some of them know, chords, and some of them are just like, I don't know, I don't do that stuff, just make me some music. And the composers, obviously, we are a music, we live and breathe that stuff. Each developer is different. Some will give you no feedback, which can be difficult because you write a piece and they're like, this is amazing. And you're like, oh, okay. That was like a quick sketch. What do I do now? Should I should I push myself to make it better, or do I just be like, oh, that's fine, okay, that was 10 minutes for a 3-minute track? Probably not, but yeah, so it's really a challenge. You need to almost motivate yourself to do better in those situations. And I've had entire games where it's like every track I send through is like, oh, this is great. And you really have to push yourself and be like, well, I need to make it better. I know it's not polished enough, and I know I need to increase the, the value of that production. The other extreme is developers who ask for lots of revisions, and that can also be difficult because when you give us a lot of information about what the project's like, and we go away and we think really hard, and we do lots of like sketches, and we come up with something and we send it back to you. Usually we put in a lot of work and we feel we've gone in the right direction, but then they say, oh no, that's not what I was thinking. I want something different. That's quite difficult for an artist or for a composer. And the first time it's okay, you're like, okay, fine, I'll try something else. But by the third or fourth or fifth or 10th time, you're kind of like, well, can I even do this? I went to a talk with the composers meetups, and the guys were doing the music for one of the most recent Tekken games, and there was two different composers working together with this Japanese company, and the Japanese company kept coming back for revisions, and one of them had done like 10 different versions, and he was like, nah man, I can't do this, I'm passing it over to you now. And thankfully they had 2 composers, and they're like, you try, because I'm not getting this. So it's quite good if you have more than one, I guess, artist or composer, but me as a single composer, I'm like, well, I got no choice, I got to just keep trying things and trying to find other ways to smooth over the difference between what they want in their head and what I'm producing. Some developers are awesome. They'll give you like a mood board where they show you the different pictures that inspires them, and the different kind of like stories or films, and that's really helpful. And things like keywords, if you can sum up your game in like 2 words, like brutal MMO or cute, crazy cloud game, if you can sum it up in 2 or 3 words, then it's really helpful. You can understand kind of the core of what that game's supposed to be. Any kind of like background story or background is really, really important. And this all boils down to what I call the key considerations. Like, if we break it down to 4 aspects of what a game can be, we have the setting. We're talking like, 1930s Mongolia, or we're talking like some crazy fantasy world where like spiders are trees and trees are spiders. Is it some grim medieval setting? So the setting's almost infinite. Almost all of these are totally infinite. You can have anything in between. Your visual aesthetic, like what does it look like? Is it like a pixel art game? Is it hyper-realistic? Is it like some stylized cell shading, like Zelda Wind Waker or something like that? And that change in each of these can totally change the feel of the game and what you need to create, like artistically and for the music. Pacing can be depending on the setting, like the specific section. So like a boss battle might be intense, the rest of the exploration area might be very relaxed. There might be puzzle sections where you want some weird puzzle music going on. And it can also be summed up by the genre as well. Like if you have an evasive horror game, like Alien Isolation, you're looking at a certain type of feeling and a certain type of music for that. And yeah, obviously the last one, theme, story, tone, are we going out and defeating all the evil? Is it like more looking within yourself? There's not quite a right or a wrong or a good or an evil. It's more like a personal development. Or is it like a romance, the actual story and the background of the characters, that kind of thing, can also totally change what we're looking at. And I find if I can sum this up for each game that I work on, it helps me to really understand where I should go. And sometimes you get problems where 2 of these are at odds with each other. And you'll see in some of the projects coming up, like sometimes it's quite difficult to reconcile when 2 things are quite strange. They don't quite go together. So for example, you've got a fast-paced racing game, everyone's driving around, having lots of fun, and multiplayer, there's power-ups and stuff. You can kind of imagine a certain type of music or a certain type of art style. It's going to be fast-paced, there's maybe xylophone, there's like the synthesizers, it's like having fun. Okay, right, so that's your theme, that's your pacing. But what if it was set in the 1920s? Suddenly it totally changed. Like the setting has now completely changed what people expect. You're going to want like maybe some jazz band or some like double bass or some weird hybrid of modern racing music and stuff in that setting. So yeah, that's a good example of just changing one thing. You suddenly have a totally different game. Another example, like 1980s hyper-realistic Bronx setting. You can kind of imagine, if you tell someone that that's what my game setting is, they're going to have a certain imagination in their mind of what they expect, early sample hip-hop, Run DMC, NWA, that kind of stuff. But what if it's a love story? There's lots of other minorities living in the Bronx in that period, not just African Americans. What if it's a love story between a Jewish and Italian girl? There's lots of options. And so that totally changes what you expect, just by changing the theme of story. Okay, first case study, Blackheart. I'm sure some of you are familiar with. This is the information I had to start with when I first joined the project back in, I think, 2018, 2019. I knew it was a fantasy game, kind of a dark setting, and I had this is kind of some of the pre-alpha artwork, these ones here. It's changed quite a lot since then. But it had this kind of stylized kind of art style. And so going on that, I didn't at the time have this key considerations set up, but I kind of could get the feeling of the game just by looking at some of the art and trying to piece it together, but I hadn't really codified how this would work. But if I look back at it now, I know the setting's kind of a fantasy world, there's magic has kind of corrupted the world, this visual aesthetic is very kind of stylized and hand-painted, all the backgrounds were kind of hand-painted, and the pacing is kind of an action RPG, you're running around and slicing stuff up and getting power-ups, and there's some resting moments where you're kind of sorting out your different abilities. And the tone and theme was quite serious. It wasn't very lighthearted, it was quite intense, lots of backstabbing and that kind of stuff. So lots of intrigue, and so yeah. The developer had sent me some Dark Souls music to start with some very haunting solo voice, and so I quite like music like this to start with. And so my first job was to try to create some kind of track to reflect that. I usually like to start with a title track, like the thing that you'll hear when you first open the menu music. Like if you can find the real core of the game that really ties everything together, you can then expand from there. And I think it's a really good way to start. And yeah, it's quite interesting to see the relationship between artists and developers. Like to start with, you're like, oh, this is the first time I've written music for them. I'm gonna do a really good job. I'll spend 3, 4, 12 hours and make it really awesome. And then a year later, you're like, oh, here's this crappy audio recording from my, on the bathroom. And I was like, and so the relationship is so interesting to see that change from the, trying to do a really good job and, you don't know this person that well to 3 months or a year down the line and you're totally best friends and just sending whatever crap you can think of and, riffing on each other. It's great. So this is what I came up with just from what he'd sent me, kind of using a heartbeat kind of motive. And I spent about 3 hours on this. And so you get the main idea of that. And this is the feedback I got from the sketch. Holy moly, I got goosebumps. Man, it's spooky. I love it. I feel like this is probably a bit too spooky to be the main menu theme. It would be incredible for a scene where some shit's about to go down. So you can kind of interpret that in a couple ways. If you just read the first 2 sentences, holy moly, I got goosebumps, you're like, okay, sweet, great, job done, you got goosebumps, that's great. But if you keep reading and really kind of analyze what he's saying, I feel like this is a bit too spooky. So that means I'm not quite on the mark. I'm not quite hitting it. It might suit somewhere else in the game, which is fine, but it's not quite there. And so there's the just replying, beating heart is subtle but totally thematic, great job. And so my reply, instead of being like, well, fuck you, I thought that was great, so let's stick with it. I don't want to do what you're going to do. I instead said, nice, I'm glad this kind of thing will fit in some way. And so, I mean, that's actually how I feel. I don't usually just be like, oh, well, screw this. Maybe after the 10th sketch, I'll start to get angry, but usually I'm a pretty calm person. So I'm not like putting anything on here. This is like legitimately my response. And then he said, yeah, we'd probably only have one or two tracks this intense. Like, it's not a horror game, but at the right moment, it could be like a oh shit feeling. And I said, okay, cool. I'll look for a bit of a lighter direction. I also want to try writing some more catchy themes. Final Fantasy VI theme, for example. He said, that's a great idea. I know the stuff I linked was probably pretty moody. So he's actually kind of misled me with what he's sent me to start with. Sharing this like Dark Souls, really haunting, intense kind of music. And it does happen. People, like, they like something and they send through like, I think this will work. But really it's up to us as artists and composers to really look closely at the project and understand what's going on, not just based on what they've sent us. And what else was I going to say? Oh yes, also the theme before, I mean, it's okay, but essentially your melody is like dun 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 dun. It's not very vibrant. You can't really get a lot of extra material out of that. Usually it's nice in a title theme to have something you can really use and evolve from there. You can come back to it later in the game, different variations. So it would kind of have limited me as well to use that. So essentially the track's not quite right. It's a bit too spooky, probably a little bit misled by what the music was that he linked. And so I would start to rewrite from scratch at this point. So the first one's just a sketch. Only spent about 2 or 3 hours. That's fine. We start again. I almost never expect a track to be perfect to start with. If I get it spot on, I'm usually either very happy, or maybe it's one of these developers who just say, oh, everything's great. And I have to really examine myself and try to see if it's correct. So this is the second attempt, trying to go a bit more like bittersweet rather than just like, intense spooky. So it's kind of nice. At this point, I'm just using solo piano just to get some ideas across. I'm not going to put a lot of time into like putting lots of orchestral instruments and just trying to get an interesting theme. I did do, well, okay, I said I'm not going to spend time, but I did do an orchestrated version. Okay, it's a little bit of extras, but same kind of. And so the feedback from that was, wow, sounds amazing, but I wonder if it's a little too cheerful for the main theme, though. Gives me total Hollow Knight vibes, which is a good thing, but I think it would suit a weird, wonderful part of the game rather than the core theme. Instead of being like, well, fuck, I just sort of respond, all right, cool, I'll look something less cheerful. I'm trying to be positive at that high respond. And I think that keeps things rolling, and that way the developer feels like we're just having a conversation and trying to work it out, which is what we're doing. I'm not angry at this stage. I'm just like, okay, let's try something out, no problem. I remember one film I had to do 12 drafts to get somewhere. It was my first time writing jazz, and it was just not working. I just kept trying. So I'm kind of persistent like that. I'll just keep trying and researching and learning more. So yeah, I've gone a little bit too cheerful. I now need to find a middle ground. Not too spooky, not too happy. Let's see what I can come up with. And so at this point, I'm just sitting down at my piano and being like, well, okay, let's see what we can do. So this is the third sketch, just trying something in the middle. I didn't actually send this to the developer. I just like trying some stuff out. You can see it's not quite happy, not quite sad, somewhere in the middle a little bit. And then I came up with this one. So I can still bring back some of that solo vocal stuff as well. And this is the feedback. Wow, dude, this sounds incredible. Totally leaning into the darker tone without going overboard. I immediately feel like I'm in a dark fairy tale, which is perfect. And I said, awesome, glad this kind of thing might work. So perfect is the word I'm looking for when I send someone a track. You know, I want to hear that is perfect, like, that is spot on. Like, I usually keep going until I hear that. So essentially, we've got the track is now right. We can extend it, we can polish it, and all that kind of stuff. And during this, I now got a keyword, dark fairy tale. You know, it's not horror. It's not kind of cheerful. It's dark fairy tale. It's a little bit mysterious, a little bit magical, but it's also a lot of suffering. So you want to be somewhere in the middle, and that keyword could help me a lot at the start if we had worked that out together. I probably would have gone in a different direction to start with. So yeah, once you have a good theme and you really push yourself to make a nice melodic theme, you can then start to riff on that. And the same probably with art. If you create something a really strong kind of core concept, you can then riff on that and do alterations and versions. So this is the main theme, finished track, not the whole track, part of it. And then we don't really hear it for most of the game, but we have it come back when you kind of open your map, have like a more calm version of it. It's just like a little variation that comes back. And then much later in the game, we can then start to really bring that theme back for like the final boss battle. And so you kind of go on most of the game without hearing this at all, and then we really bring it back with a heady, in a couple of different versions. With a strong melodic content, you really bring it back in lots of different ways. People go like, oh, that's the theme. Oh my God, I'm fighting the big boss. And then right at the end, I originally was like, I should do like a singer-songwriter thing at the end. And I was like, oh, there's no way the developer will accept that. And so I just tried a sketch with like guitar and voice. And I was like, this would be cool, but there's no way he'll agree with this. And he was like, well, this is awesome. Okay, let's do it. And I was like, okay, sweet. I guess I'm singing now. So yeah, this is the end credits. it's also a nice way to have the credits roll with this very like kind of sad song using the same theme. So yeah, you can imagine if I'd stuck with the very first sketch, we would never have got those kind of interesting variations. It would have been like da 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 da. Like that's hard to make a song with that. So yeah. Anyway, so that's example of the communication that went through with the Blackheart theme. That's a good example. We will now look at The Ruins of Calaworm, which is a roguelite created by a German developer based on a 90s, cult 90s German hit on the ZX Spectrum or something, which no one has heard of outside of Germany. I don't remember the German name, but he's essentially recreated this game. So key considerations, we're looking at like it's a Dark Ages settings, so it's like 1300, 1400 AD. There's Lovecraftian horror. You've got like unspeakable creatures that you're trying to deal with. You play as like this plague doctor with the mask. But with that setting, you also have a problem of the aesthetic being 16-bit kind of pixel art look. So you have this Dark Ages kind of setting, but also 16-bit cutesy kind of look. The pacing is it's turn-based, so when you press the button on a roguelike, as you know, you press the button and you move, and the world advances as you move. So it can be as slow or as fast as you like. You're kind of exploring this ruined fortress. You've got to free the land from evil. But then, along with these quite serious elements, you have this kind of whimsical tone where, like, there's these holes around on the floor, and you can, like, the enemies will follow you, and you'll, like, tempt them to go into the hole, and they'll fall down with, like, a... So it's, like, it has this, like, whimsical kind of element to it as well. So there's quite a few things acting against each other there. This quite serious horror Lovecraftian setting, but yet this cute pixel art kind of whimsical look and tone. So how do we reconcile those together? How does this creepy, cute horror stuff work? And you can see there's the enemies get falling down the hole there. And it's quite fun. The sound design is very kind of punchy, like kind of Commodore-ish kind of sound. So my first instinct, I spent about an hour on this, trying to do like kind of using synthesizers from the period and putting a whole lot of reverb on them and doing weird recorded sounds. So. That's my voice. So what do you guys think? Would that suit the game, or thumbs up, thumbs down? Yeah, okay, I see a lot of wishy-washy and thumbs down, yes, I get it, exactly. So this was too serious. The developer's like, this is too horror-ish, it doesn't quite work. Like, where's the whimsy? Where's the fun, So I started experimenting with kind of like waltzes and kind of like using Nintendo Entertainment System synths and viola to try to make something a bit more fun, and this is what I came up with. It's been about an hour on this one. What do you think? It's getting better? Getting closer? It has kind of a cheeky, lifting kind of feel. And so the developer was pretty happy with that, and that ended up going on to become one of the main background tracks. But I wanted to go further. I was like, okay, it's a medieval setting. Why don't we try some actual Dark Ages music and see what happens, Let's use some weird instruments from the period, and it would be really cool. And so I found this instrument called the crumb horn, which looks like this. It sounds like this. Is this going to fit? What do you think? Yeah, some guys are like... So yeah, I spent about 2 hours on this, and this is like trying to do some like more legitimate medieval kind of stuff. And so the feedback from the developer was essentially, please don't do that medieval stuff. I do think the middle part is a bit too intense right now. And so we essentially worked out that it's not, I shouldn't do that. Yeah, don't do that medieval shit, essentially. And I said, okay, cool. I can easily tone down the intensity, make things a bit more playful. So, some medieval angles might have worked. In medieval times, there's lots of variety. You have the music being played in the taverns, which is very raucous and fun, and you have the music being played in the churches, which is very kind of holy and very austere. So I thought maybe we could use a Renaissance era. Even though it's set in Dark Ages, a lot of people don't really know or care about the difference between Dark Ages and Renaissance. So I can use some Renaissance music, especially what's called a viol. It's like an early version of a cello or violin. And they play these very, very beautiful kind of quartets of 4 players or so, all playing together, very beautiful interweaving lines. And nowadays, when they play strings, they tend to add vibrato. The note goes, but in those days, we don't know for certain, or at least people play it this way. They play very, very flat. It's very smooth, and they don't put a lot of vibrato in. And it makes for a much more pure tone, I think. But everyone has their own thing. So anyway, this is violin music. Very beautiful and wholesome. And so using that, I kind of turned to more of this Renaissance idea, still using NES synthesizers and real instruments, because I felt that was the way to combine the real setting with the 16-bit aesthetic, was to use the NES synths and the real instruments. I felt like that was going to be a key to unlocking this kind of disparity of different key considerations. So that's what I came up with, using the more Renaissance vibes. And so we had the whimsical track for like gameplay, but this was more for a title track, something that kind of draw you in with something a little bit sad. And the response was, beautifully sad and haunting. This might be the way to go after all. The sketches you've seen before are really good now, but in hindsight, I think they might have been a bit too over the top and contradictory to the overall style of the game, which is still somewhat drawing from the horror tropes, but not so much in a scary way, but more gamey, whimsical indeed. And so, we felt like this was a really good direction. So I put together the track, hired a viola player to record the viola parts, and used a recorder consort, which is just a sampled recorder consort. In Renaissance time, they'd have a whole lot of recorder players play together. Some of them would be longer and deeper, and some would be smaller. Nothing like your childhood recorder classes. Actually, really, really beautiful. Go away and look up recorder consort. It's so, so gorgeous. Worth checking out. Also, ambient sounds. I record myself during wind, I'm a lot. Like every track would start with me recording my voice as wind for some reason, and it just became part of it. So this is what I came up with. It's amazing. Such an interesting game. What is diphobia? And yeah, so that's where we got to with the title track. I think it suits pretty well. The developer was very happy with it. So yeah. But I kind of wanted to go further as well and build a toolkit of interesting stuff to draw from. So looking at creepy cute, what could be creepy cute? Looking at like Danny Elfman film scores like Nightmare Before Christmas, a Soviet composer called Alfred Schnittke, who I've always loved and does some very kind of kooky, strange stuff. Some of his music's very bleak and depressing, but some of it is like inspired by like early Russian proto-surrealists and quite unusual. And Darius Milhaud, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly, was a French composer who did a lot of interesting kind of proto-surrealist stuff, having instruments playing very, very closely together that wouldn't usually work, but sounds quite cool. So here's an example of a Schnittke piece. This is based on Gogol suite. Gogol is a well-known Russian kind of pseudo-surrealist poet, I think, or playwright. Anyway, this is an orchestra in Russia. You can see why I thought this would be appropriate. So yeah, they had a lot of fun with that piece, and I always thought that the vodka shots were scored into the music, but I found out later that they kind of just did that in the performance, so I was very disappointed. I was like, I should score some vodka shots into my music. And so using that, I sent the whole suite through to the game developer, and he was like, this is great, it has lots of things we can draw from. We could use the really intense stuff for boss battles, we could use the really kooky stuff for more whimsical, overworld kind of stuff. So this is sort of what I came up with based on everything I'd learned so far, Renaissance stuff, Schnittke, all these creepy, cute kind of ideas. So this was kind of trying to go in that direction. crumb horn. I snuck the crumb horn back in. Never noticed. Jericho, one of my favorite surrealist painters. So yeah, that's the kind of cool journeys I've been on in video game music. Thanks a lot to everybody. Oh, look at that. Just as the hands go up, I finished the talk. That's great. So awesome. I hope that's been instructional, or you could take something away from it. I think we have time for questions.
I'm curious if at any point during the development of that soundtrack, did you just kind of fall into the PS1 medieval game? Did you have that as a
I loved that as a kid.
Yes.
I had totally forgotten about it though by that point, and I totally, if I'd forgotten the game, I've definitely forgotten the music. I'll need to go back and re-listen to that and see how it compares. But that is a fantastic game.
Yeah.
Very, very good game. Yes. But no, it wasn't on my mind, unfortunately. Sorry.
Hi, so I've got a question about kind of that developer-composer dialogue. When you're designing game music as more than just background music, such as incorporating it with regards to level design, focusing on things like player pacing, how can I best provide for a composer as the designer when these things are important for the pacing of the music?
Very good question. There seems to be, 10 years ago they would have the battle track, right? When you get close to the mud crab, the battle track activates. I think providing them with an understanding of how things will be dynamic. Will there be battle, and will at one point you be at level 100, a mud crab should no longer be important? Maybe they have a scalability of when things should change, not always be static. I think it'll come down to probably getting your composer involved in playtesting, or maybe even just like show them some gameplay and be like, well, this is what's happening. If their game is amazing, get them in and actually get them to start playing as well. I love playing the games and trying to understand what the feel is as I walk around and how things change going into combat, or like we would often have things where you get close to a certain character and some kind of music would come through, some kind of shining aura or something. And it really adds a lot to games when you can do that stuff. You can sit down with the composer and be like, okay, I want a moment when I walk up to this hill, I want some kind of moment that really hits everybody. And working together and putting in the hours to really spot those moments. And, I do lots of screen sharing with the developers, like in their Unity editor. They'd be like, okay, this is the place where I want to have it. I'd be like, okay, tweak it a little bit more so we hear it a little bit earlier. We'd spend like hours just tweaking those small things. I think it's so worth it doing those sessions together and really fine-tuning things. Even if it's just for 1 or 2 moments, it can really help add a lot. Yeah. Nice. Yep. Jen?
So this is a bit of a complicated question, but are you ever roped into the QA process later down the line when you finished composing the tracks? Because I can sometimes I've found that like we've had tracks where like either we've had volume issues or balancing issues. How involved do you end up getting in that process?
I will always try to help. I'll always get involved. I think that's part of maybe like aftercare, I guess. I can't think of anything where that's actually happened, but if it did happen, if there were issues, I would, I'd go back and I'd try to create whatever I could. The sooner that can happen after the project, the better, because like if I try to open a file from like 5 years ago, they'd be like, oh, we're missing all these samples. You had like, it was like 2 computers ago. So the sooner it happens, the better. Like sometimes even like after a 5-year development, I'm like, okay, I need to do the soundtrack now. Oh shit, I didn't export high quality audio files back then. So I learned a lot as I go about, keeping high quality stems and high quality files around in case there are changes needed. And I personally would always help. If I was smart, I'd put in my contract, any extra weird stuff later on, you pay me this much per hour. And I probably will do that when I get home. But yeah, that's what I do.
to playtesting as part of the music design process, are there any tools that developers could include in the build that would make life easier for you, like the ability to replay certain sections or?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. It would be very specific though, wouldn't it? Like you'd be trying to work on a very certain area. Usually they would just drop me in the area they're concerned about. The player spawn would be the small area we're trying to get right. We were like trying to time some wings or something, and I was doing some wing sound design, and they're like, okay, just put me in the part where the boss comes in with the wings, and we'll work it out from there. So yeah, I think just player spawns probably is the easiest. Any tools you can put in, if you're having problems with exact levels or something, like you could put a little volume level or what, maybe you've got an audio file and you're altering the volume to know what that volume is at the moment. You can say, oh, it's at 20, that should probably be at 30 maybe. But that's very specific, and it would be a very specific little section that would require that. And as game developers, you guys are very busy, you probably don't have time to program in those small little tools to be in. Yep, on the back.
When you're communicating with developers to create these sketches and effects, is there anything you wish developers did more of or didn't do in the kind of communication side of things?
Good question. I think providing mood boards is really good. Everyone's different, but personally, I think people are very visual. If they can see something that is really concrete, like a picture of an old dungeon or something, or a bright amusement park, we can instantly understand. Even with a single picture, I could probably write a piece that works well. I find that really, really useful. Putting music in the game already, I find is very bad. Temp tracks can be very distracting, and I know a lot of film composers complain about that as well. And you end up getting in the kind of Marvel loop where you have a temp track based on another temp track, based on another temp track, 16 movies down the line, and suddenly you don't have any strong themes anymore. So if you are going to send a build to a composer, maybe just strip all the music out and let them they can use the silence to grow from that. Yep.
Sorry. So, do you have any advice for curbing overcommitment with like more amateur or less experienced developers as an artist of whatever kind?
Program overcommitment. What would you mean?
So let's say that you're wanting to work with someone and they're just basically you're both pretty green, but you're trying to both starting out, trying to make a career out of it. But the other person may have been flakier, or maybe they're trying to make you commit more. Previous talk basically talked about for producing one trying to get people doing it for free if they can, and we don't have a lot of funding, especially early on. How do you help against maybe so you secure yourself from burning out later, from overcommitting after that project that maybe don't have such fruitful concepts?
Okay, so the question is, how do you prevent yourself from overcommitting to a project where you're not sure if the people are going to flake out kind of thing, and burning out on a project that you don't really know? That's a challenge, and I think you just have to feel it out with each project and each person, because you don't know if a person's going to flake out until 6 months later when they flake out. And you're like, oh wow, they flaked out. So it's a challenge. It's always good to start, I guess, on positive expectation. You go in with good feeling and see what happens. But if you find that it's not really going anywhere, I guess you just pull back on the amount that you're putting in. It's a challenging question. I don't think, as a composer, I'm qualified to really answer that well. But thank you. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I used Fmod with Blackheart. I found it really, really useful, and it taught me a lot about looping things and transitioning things. I found that really, 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 really useful. And to be able to take over that implementation side from the developer and be like, okay, I'll handle this. I'll throw the tracks in. Instead of like, I've got a track, I now have to upload it to this, now you have to download it, now you have to implement it. I just be like, I'm throwing it straight in. The boss music now in. Like, it's so much easier. I find it really, really easy. And the middleware is often quite similar to the tools we use already, so it's not a hard transition. So yeah, kick your composer's ass and be like, oi, learn Fmod. It's easy, yeah. Okay, I feel like, yep, no. Cool, thanks a lot everyone, and enjoy. I think we're going to lunch or something?